Hello and welcome to Mostly Off Topic. Deep, deep in the depths of the Kickstarter for second edition, The One Ring. Hope you're all good. Right, that was my planned intro. There we go. I'm joined by the usual crew who are just going to say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
That's how well trained they are. They did it in the same order as I normally do. Anyway, okay. So hope everybody's keeping well. Thank you so much for everybody, the views, the new subscribers, the comments. It's been really heartening to see, one, the Kickstarter taking off so well. Secondly, the interest kind of coming across to us, and people looking at what we're saying, trying to kind of form their own views. Hopefully that we're helping integrate a few thoughts that you might have had, so you can come at a good decision as to whether you're going to back or not, or whether maybe you're just going to pick it up downstream. Because the only thing that we know at the moment is the only exclusive of the Kickstarter is the collector's edition. Everything else should be able to be picked up. So in this video, we're not going to talk so much about what's happening in the Kickstarter. We're going to really just look at what we know as a fact now, based upon the Q&A interviews with Francesco, the updates on the Kickstarter, various other items of information we're pretty confident about, and we're going to talk from our positions as players and as lore masters. So this is really about what do we know about the rule sets. The game is going to be different with second edition. Spin that forward to when we pick up and play it. What do we think it's going to impact? How do we think it's going to change? What would happen to our existing campaigns? So we're going to be asking ourselves, what's going to change? What are you going to get out of the box in terms of cultures and callings? If you're running a game, what does that mean to you? Both in terms of an existing campaign, or maybe thinking about kicking off a campaign. And then we're going to speculate to accumulate. We're going to have a think about what's coming up in the near future. So that's what we're going to cover off in the video. Hope you enjoy it. Please do leave a comment or a like or what have you. Feel free to share this with anybody who suggests that they're interested. So, quickly run through what we know about second edition rules so far. Kind of no particular order for this, other than what's pinned in the Discord channel pin note about changes to second edition rules. Body is now called strength. Explore and hunting have swapped columns in terms of what attribute will affect them. Heroes start with valor and wisdom of 1, with 1 virtue and 1 reward. The base target numbers are now calculated for each of the attributes, and they're based upon 18 minus the value of your attribute. Favoured skills will use the best of 2 feat rolls, so essentially you roll the d12 twice and take the best result of that, so advantage for those who are familiar with the D&D rule set. There are ill-favoured rolls, where you take the worst of those 2 feat dice rolls, and that might be, for instance, when you're wounded. Hope gets chosen before the roll, and you get an extra success die. So currently, hope you choose afterwards, and you get to add a fixed number to it, so you know success or fail. Whereas this will be a much more kind of variable possibility. Hope will add 2 extra dice when you're inspired, and that might be that you've got a trait that you can invoke that's applicable to the fiction at that point. Most modifiers, you kind of change, add or lose dice, as opposed to changing the target. Though I do think the Loremaster gets to kind of discretion to increase or decrease the target number, albeit it'll be a plus or a minus based upon the calculated value. If you roll a 6 in combat, then apparently it's going to give choices for bonus results that you could do right away, and that might be linked to the magical effects, which I think Francesco has said are replacements or supplements to cultural traits, so they're unique to the culture, and it might be that if you roll a 6 in combat, that a magical effect gets triggered, but that's to be seen. If you've got a trait that you can invoke, it gives you an extra success die as opposed to a base level pass. Forward stance in combat gives you an extra success die for your attack rolls, I imagine. Defensive takes 1 away. Parry gets calculated in advance, though I kind of always thought it did. There's one main and one secondary action every round, so the action economy gets a bit of a boost. That secondary action, an example is remove a helm, so you can take a fatigue reduction in combat. I think this helps speed the game up. It'll also help increase player choice, and it may well then allow some of these bonus results to kind of like trigger in, or additional actions and attributes to bring to play, because you get an additional action you can take with it. In the journey, the Loremaster does a march roll to see where events may happen. I don't think it's an event as opposed to a hazard, for instance, and that might well be that as opposed to rolling an Eye of Sauron triggering a hazard or what have you. And the march roll doesn't affect how fast you get to your location, it's just about where events happen. And journey rolls are renamed Hunter and Lookout. There are now codified 3 pillars of play: journeys, councils, combat. There are magical effects, which are a supplement to cultural traits or replacement, and they get invoked when magical effects dice comes up. For instance, if you're a hobbit and rolling stealth and you did really well, maybe they've got a magical effect that allows you to kind of semi-hide in plain sight. There are landmarks now, which form part of the core set, part of the rule set, which are self-contained capsules of information. So you get a description, you get a map, you get the people that are there. So you won't just get the ruined castle, you get a ruined castle. So it's very specific. If anybody wants to get a lowdown on this, go and download the Forbidden Lands Quick Start from Drive-Thru RPG. It's for free, and it has an example of what, I can't remember what they're called, but the equivalent of landmarks. So that'll give you a flavour for what you're going to get. Really helpful for a lore master. I think I'm sure we'll come to talk about that. And there are mechanics about forming the fellowship, apparently. So some mechanical heft to how you bring together the group of people. Maybe relationships that exist between the characters. That's a usual way to form those kinds of things. And when Francesco was asked in the Q&A what the biggest difference between first and second is, he said tile mechanics. So I think this is going to be a system-led design, a more holistic approach, as opposed to bolting on different components that you then have to integrate back into your core, which always carries some risk around it. I won't be surprised if there's templating as well in the text, so keywords like you'd find in, say, a card game that have some mechanical meaning that can allow you to create much more tight and meaningful language. I think we've kind of restricted ourselves there to what we actually know, as opposed to what we surmise. Of all the resources that we have, the updates to the Kickstarter, really good. The Q&A with Francesco and Martin. And Francesco's really good at hitting the forums and clarifying things. So if you've got a question, go to the Free League forum. Just Google it and just go to the tour and just ask a question. And I'm sure that he'll be on there at certain points to kind of like just clarify what's happening. It's a chunk of stuff. Some stuff big, some stuff small. So let's start with the mechanics. Let's kind of like move there. Then we'll start to think about characters and cultures. Then we'll look more broadly into some of the more esoteric questions. So Joe, from your perspective as a lore master and as a player, what do you think? What's going to have the most benefit or the most demerit as far as you're concerned?
It all sounds good. I think the sentiment that things are going to be tighter, things are all going to be in one place is good. So we have, I'm sure, between us a lot of memories of kind of pausing the game and picking up the various books and looking through PDFs and trying to find the right book for the right rule at the right time in first edition. And it sounds like obviously the Francesco and the team at Free League have got a huge pool of stuff to draw on already and bring it all together in this core book and hopefully kind of get it all in one place. I believe that because of the licensing, they're not allowed to replicate certain mechanics and just lift them and port them over to second edition, so that they've kind of either renamed or completely redesigned some of the subsystems and the extra bits. So wondrous items and artifacts and things like that. There will be different kind of ways of doing all of that stuff. And some of the tables where you you roll for useful items that you might have in your pocket or in your pack. All of that stuff is kind of gone or has changed completely. So so there's obviously a kind of a reason for doing a lot of it, but the end result is that they're bringing it all together into one place, so that's great. The only other thing that I'll call out that I think is a really good idea is having fellowship creation rules, because in first edition it's very loose, and there's some examples of things you might want to do. You might have been brought together by Glorfindel or yada yada, but this gives you a kind of a reason for being together, and it makes you go through that process. So I think that's really useful.
Yeah. Okay. And is there anything from the Loremaster point of view that you're looking forward to, other than the structure of the books help in rapid finding of information?
Yeah, I think the less bookkeeping is really good. I just think, I mean, it's going to be tighter. It's going to be, it's the One Ring 2.0, and I mean, I was reading some of the Rivendell first edition book just yesterday, and I just ended up reading the complete history of Eriador and going back to Arnor and the divvying up of what was Numenor, the Numenorian kings and the three kingships, and it's just so well written and summarized, and it's kind of 2 or 3 pages long, but it just draws you into that land. So knowing that they've got all of that and a much tighter rule set, I think it's it all sounds positive. I'll admit I haven't looked into the kind of mechanical changes to combat until we've discussed it tonight. So I think hearing all of that is really exciting, because if there's one thing that has really kind of needed a bit of a shot in the arm, it's combat in the One Ring.
Yeah. There's been no suggestion of gridded combat or anything along those lines. Or what's your thoughts on that, Joe? Are you quite happy to keep the theatre in mind? I'm assuming the engagement mechanic remains the same. We don't actually know. Is there anything that you think actually, let's just kill some sacred cows and I'd rather it be this?
I mean, I'm easy either way. I think we've done in the past, we've used like a sort of stance mat thing where we put our minis on there, and then towards the middle of our Darkening of Mirkwood campaign, I started to bring in some orc minis, and it doesn't really improve your experience of the game for me, because place and landscape is so important in Tolkien. The game is very good at kind of evoking the themes, and it uses place and journeys and landscapes and now landmarks as a way of it brings all of that stuff together really, really nicely. So for me, theatre of the mind is definitely the way to play this game. And I think occasional use of not battle maps, but a map of a village or of some ruins could be useful. And so John Hodgson's stuff in the past has been really nice for doing that.
Yeah. What about you, Ben? Because I know that you're a more tactical player at heart. You in the 5th edition games that we play, you do like to maximise the grid and the advantage.
I think the thing, like, I'm all for theatre of the mind. I think it's great. I think the problem is theatre of the mind relies on you all having the same image of the layout of what's in front of you. I think there's a lot of time with theatre of the mind where you're like, so where am I in relation to this? Who's that? Like, is he near me? Where did he go? Is he now round the back of me? That type of stuff. And I think that can sometimes break that narrative. Whereas even just a simple like grid with a couple of, even with just some tokens on, where all right, these, and I'm like, all right, and then I jump to the guy on my left and I stab him in the throat while backhanding the guy with my shields on the right. That type of thing. I think it actually makes theatre of the mind a lot easier for me personally. I think the fact that like combat in general is an area that they're tightening up, brilliant. One of the main things for me that came out of that like list that you just said then was the 6s in combat have an effect like after. rather than it being like a called shot. I know I went through a very, very bad rolling phase where all of my called shots with my character failed miserably, despite me having several thousand dice. And it was essentially like, oh, I roll the dice, nothing happens. Next. Whereas actually it being like, I roll the dice, I'm doing something anyway. And then something amazing happens. Sounds brilliant to me. Much more kind of involved. And I'm hoping that the magical traits, for example, will be something that there's a variety that you will want to use in different circumstances. Whereas again, it's like I found that I used the same cold shot again and again and again in the previous game, and it got a bit stale towards the end. Even when I did get salty over the fact that Joe would bring in so many enemies that I was no longer allowed to be in an archery position and force me into a combat position with which I could do nothing, it was at least some variety of what I actually played.
Yeah,
I think that sounds really interesting.
You moved that rearward stance and realised you had a short sword, as I recall.
I was just like, oh, I was holding by the wrong end.
And moving across to you then, Matt, from the list that we've kind of gone through, and the list is constrained to what we know about, what we've had Francesco or other confirmation of. What stands out to you, combat or otherwise, there?
Yeah, no, thanks. That tidying up a little bit, they can draw on the experiences from the first edition, and no doubt they're maximizing that. Touching on what Ben talks about, the combat, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's a bit more active situation where you can sort of, I guess, maximize risk in that combat, because if you're a good fighter, perhaps you shouldn't be in that position that Ben described. You're rolling, how unlikely can you be? So I like how they tidied that up a little bit. Conversely, with the hope, for example, I like that you now have to make a conscious decision about, hang on a minute, this could go dicey. How about I put some hope into it, rather than let's hit hope. Right, okay. I'll spend that point of hope. Thanks very much. That element of the hope was almost a sort of a calculation. That so the risk reward was not quite right, perhaps there. I like also the way they tidied up the favored skills. That's definitely a positive, because, to be honest, for me it was like, right, okay, I'm only using favored skills. So the benefit of favored skills was either when you upgrade them, or when you spend that point of hope and you get the favored body or heart, as opposed to the normal level. So I never felt like, just because I'm favored in travel, I can really travel well. It didn't translate. Now, with an additional feat die, there's a tangible benefit there, right? I'm going to roll it twice, and I know I can travel until I get into the bog. But that's usually a different story. And I think on the broader point, just to finish off, is that I guess it's something that Francesco said in his interview, and it's that the whole theatrics of what you have at the table. I know we mentioned miniatures, but the land bag is great, because you can then build that and put this together. In a previous episode, I did mention these cards with weapons that builds up on the imagination, but also the stances. So all that sort of brings to the table a sort of an aura of fantasy happening, and on top of that, there's obviously the whole lore of Tolkien. So having all that brought on the table, that's I think fantastic, and I think this represented quite nicely in the starter pack, where for especially new players you can pick that up. So apart from the book, we know the stuff, right? If you've read Tolkien. But I really like how the Free League, they really want to introduce new players to the game, where perhaps some RPG systems are like, well, okay, there's an X edition. Of course it's better. Of course it's good for you. But I can see how they make quite a lot of effort to bring new players in and say, well, if you haven't played, well, there's all this nice stuff that you can have at the table. And if you play RPG for the first time, it's a bit daunting, because like, how do you work that out? And you have these little bits and bobs that can help you build that theatric stuff that we've talked about.
Okay.
So that's it. Yeah, that's it for me.
I
Okay.
realised I didn't call out one thing that I'm genuinely really interested in, which is landmarks. And we talked about this earlier, being one of the areas of the game that was again kind of a little bit loose and was referenced in a lot of the source books and the region books that are, it's got a lot of adventure hooks in those region books, and locations and characters are sort of there, but it's not really developed in a way that you can just grab it from the book and plant it into your session or into your plans for a campaign or whatever. So I think that's going to be really useful, a very kind of handy toolkit really for lore masters.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anything that you want to add, Ben?
No, I think Matt covered quite a lot of it. Like I said, I definitely agree in the sense of the getting an additional dice and both favour now being a roll of the dice, an actual gamble, rather than it always felt like a bit of a cheat to just kind of go, oh, well, I've rolled and I've failed. I'll spend a point. No, I haven't. There was no how that point, whereas now it's just no, this is really important. I'm going to invest in this now. Oh, and then it still is a roll of the dice. You could spend your point of hope and still fail miserably. And I think as much comes out of failing some of these checks as does succeeding. I don't think it's as one of our last games, for example, might have pointed out. There's some benefits to not always having the expected outcome.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think this new system reinforces that.
Yeah. So for me, the things that are going to make the most difference at the table are favoured skills, base target numbers getting calculated, and the ability to get an extra dice if you can have a trait invoked. Because I think what that allows is you to more quickly have the character that you've got in your mind behaving and achieving what you thought that they should do. How many times have you got slightly frustrated that you're just rolling feat dice for this thing that's actually fairly key to your character, but you never quite invested the right points in or what have you? So now having a little bit of mechanical support to more clearly realise in the mechanic what the fiction is, I think is going to make a massive difference to players. Also, I just like rolling dice, and from a lore master point of view, being able to say it's favoured, you've done something cool, it's favoured, that is such an easy kind of muscle memory thing to have. So that's the kind of mechanical stuff. Let's move across then to what we're getting out of the box in terms of the cultures and the callings. And if you're running a game currently, which aspects are you going to be able to translate across? Which bits are you going to maybe have to wait a little bit for? So I think, Joe, are you able to list out the cultures that are going to be available from day one?
Yes, I am. Yeah, okay. So judging by what was in, so it's on the Kickstarter page, this screenshot, sorry, JPEG of a page from the book. And so assuming this is still going to be what's included in the core book, you have bardings. So these are men of Dale. They're kind of equivalent of sort of knights, really. Often, bowmen, I think. Then you have Breelanders. So, men of Bree from Eriador. Dwarves, just a general kind of dwarf category. There's no distinction there between which part of Middle Earth they're from. Same case with elves. You just have elves as a whole. No high elves, no necessarily wood elves or anything like that. Then hobbits, again, no subcategories of hobbits, and rangers. And in first edition, rangers are kind of a more advanced class of culture, really. So they're intended to supplement an already established set of companions. So those are the 6 that are included in the core rules that we know of. There's also a stretch goal in the Kickstarter, which is called Peoples of Wilderland, which will then bring in 3 additional cultures. Are they complete cultures or are they conversion kits for first edition?
I think they're complete cultures with the ability to convert over, but I don't know.
Okay, so that includes Wood Elf, Beorning, and Woodman. So Wood Elf will be kind of Thranduil or Lorien type of elves, and then Beorning's obviously the Anduin Vale, and Woodmen are men who foolishly stuck around in Mirkwood for a long time.
Hey.
Foolish, just leave it at foolish.
Is that they were foolishness then? They didn't know that Alaric was coming.
I think it's time to bring back Alaric.
Mirkwood, born and bred, strong in arm and thick in head.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
Good Wood Elf accent, Joe. So that's kind of what you get. Do we have any insight into callings?
Well, we've kind of hazarded a bit of a guess based on the actual play. There seemed to be a treasure hunter, which is first edition standard calling, a warden, and a scholar, and then I think there was also a champion and a messenger. So champion sounds more akin to Slayer from first edition, maybe kind of toned down with the massively bloodthirsty, murderous sort of traits, and more of a warrior class. Messenger, yeah, that's an interesting one if that's true. The only one that's missing then from first edition is leader.
Yeah. Okay, and do we have any views as a group in terms of that, the characters, the choices, maybe some of the relocation to Eriador as well with regards to that, because that'll be a part of what we get in terms of the landscape and the play area. Anybody want to hazard?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say this. So there really wouldn't be too many options in terms of the realities of Eriador in the twilight of the Third Age. So hobbits in the Shire and the surrounding area, and men of Bree, and then rangers, who will be very few and far between. So yeah, that sounds fair.
Yeah. And I read that Francesco had said that one of the deliberate decisions they took was to not base it around Gondor, because that would be too much like a typical D&D level of technology and environment, and that by placing it into Eriador, placing it around the Hobbits, placing it around the Breland, it was more akin to what people would expect from the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings books. It's more in keeping with that kind of feel, and certainly it kind of makes sense to start there and journey outwards for any number of reasons. Okay, so question, guys. Then, so we have got our Laughter of Dragons campaign, which we kind of know from the actual play, and 3 dwarves of different cultures. Worth saying. But then we have the Dark and Mirkwood campaign, and I play a Rohirrim, Fastred. So that's not on the list. Ben plays a Anduin Vale Hobbit, not on the list, and Matt plays Alaric, who at one time was a woodman but has evolved beyond the boundaries of
statesman, barbarian, cop, scientist.
It's like Conan if he had all of the pulp genres available to him to kind of
Alaric PI.
taken. So from our perspective as a group, then, so let's just imagine November rolls around. We'll be towards the back end, I think, of the Laughter of Dragons. What are we going to do with second edition? Are we going to respin it Darkening of Mirkwood? Are we going to pick it and start again back in Eriador? What do we think? And I haven't asked this question particularly before, so I'm interested now.
That's just putting us on the spot there.
It is
Paul,
a little.
thank you. So for me, it's quite tricky because the Mirkwood campaign, the Wildland, that's very sort of pronounced. You know, we've had some really sort of adventure based stuff. There were spiders. There was some zombies. There was even like a werewolf, which I swear I think
spoilers.
But that may not be true. There was some, very sort of varied, but all sort of adventure-related stuff. There was a little bit of politics, and I may have done made some silly decisions as a so-called statement of woodmankind. But that was that. Now we're more in Laughter of Dragons. There's a bit more class, a bit more culture, because it's no new and upcoming city. There are some clear political issues. We got dragged into the massive sort of shitstorm of who is with whom, and trying to get out of that. I mean, I think Ben would completely agree that getting the hell out of that and just going to the open road, would be great. And then the third one, which would be Eriador, that would be a tough call. I mean, it's a land steeped in history. There's so many things that have happened there. I'm not going to make a call now, but I would fancy playing a ranger at some point, just vaguely.
I'll get you a fence to sit on there, Matt. Joe looks eager to get it. Joe looks eager to come in on this one.
I can wait if Ben wants to.
I have actually, unlike Matt, I've given this quite a bit of thought. I gave this thought since the start of discussion of second edition. For me, it depends on a couple of things. If the fellowship forming has a really strong mechanic in the new system, I'd actually like to form a fellowship under it. It always felt we had a bit of a tenuous. Like, we just happened to be hanging around, and Radagast went, "You two go there." And then, this guy turned up on an horse. And there was no real reason for us to be bonded in that way.
And then there's 10 of us all of a sudden. Just the guy.
That's not just a horse. That's Amy. She is.
Well, this horse turned up with some bloke on it.
Yeah, but hang on. At some point, if we would set up a camp, we could be actually classed as a hamlet. So, that's...
I think the other factor is how Hobbit is portrayed. See, I played the Wild Hobbit for the very reason that I wasn't a big fan of hobbits, and it got away from, they're all so happy and light and shiny. It's like I had an emo stealth hobbit, and I quite liked that juxtaposition. Whereas if this only enables me to have a bit more of the, I'm from the Shire, I like potatoes, I'm not interested in that. I'd rather have a new character. I think, my leanings in general, just because I love character creation, I'd want to be rolling up a new series anyway, because I think we got it to a good place. Yes, there is more stories we could tell. I wouldn't mind being linked to it. I wouldn't mind going back into it at some point. But I think for learning a new system, as different as it may be, I'd quite like to start afresh, day one. Let's see how these mechanics actually link in. So I'd go for having a new roll of the dice, to be honest.
Okay. And Joe, you lore mastered the Darkening of Mirkwood?
Yeah. So I love the Darkening of Mirkwood campaign. I think so. It was my first taste of GMing the game. I think I'd be perfectly happy to park that and work out how, if we choose to come back to the campaign, let alone those characters, whatever we want to do, park that and just enjoy the new edition in whatever way we can. So the first thing I would like to do is I would like to open the starter set, and I would like to do the one shot in the starter set with lobelia, Sackville Baggins, Drogo, and all of that stuff, because it just sounds so far removed from what we've done with the game. It sounds like a lot of fun. It's a one-shot. It's very minimal investment. Pre-gens, just experience it like a bunch of new players. It's a good way to reboot. Laughter of Dragons, I'm really enjoying. I'm enjoying being on the other side of the screen and just playing. I also really like our dysfunctional band of dwarves, and it feels like there's a lot of fun to be had there. So maybe, I don't know, whatever happens with this game, but maybe further down the line, they may want to go to Moria.
Whether Balin will let you or not.
If we break out of jail,
if he's
still
breaking
out of jail, we have to go.
I think we're doing all right.
Then the last bit is, I think in the other video we did, I was a little bit lukewarm on Eriador, and so I read the kind of history of Eriador in the Rivendell first edition book, and actually I think that there's a lot of stuff there that will be interesting to explore from a lore master point of view. It kind of, it interests me. So Angmar, you've got the former realm of Angmar. There's still some nasties hanging around there. There's a lot of stories, a lot of history to those places. Many huge battles were fought throughout Eriador against the Witch King. They suffered plagues and terrible winters where people starved, people died in their thousands. There's a rich history there to explore. And I just get that sense of, you could leaf through the appendices of The Lord of the Rings and spend a good few evenings by the fireside, mapping it all out and getting some kind of campaign together for that.
Okay. So just observation about Eriador. You got less of a burning platform, because frankly, the witch, Sauron's got quite a lot to get through before he gets up there. So whilst Angmar and the tragic history of the land definitely kind of can create quite a bit of conflict, the conflict feels as if it will be naturally a skirmish, as opposed to kind of like, at least maybe in the players' minds rather than the characters' minds, this kind of like playoff or tied to the War of the Ring. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays and how you can bring it back into that wider narrative and wider sense of history that there is there. So that'll be interesting to see how that moves out.
I think skirmish kind of works a bit better though. I think the game struggles, or it did in the last edition in particular, when you tried to introduce them into bigger battles. It all got very like, there was a million things going on, but you're still only fighting these 5 people in front of you.
That's characteristic.
You haven't answered the question, Paul, that you asked us as well.
Okay. So anyway, that's characteristic of role-playing games, to be perfectly honest. Anything that's built around the party level struggles when that party is placed into a wider battle context. You do small missions, you do commando missions as a rule. So my problem is that Fast Tread does not convert. Fast Tread is boom. He is a man of the history. He is looking backwards rather than forwards, which says a lot about him anyway. And I need rules to be able to ride my palfrey. And if I can't convert Amy, who is Fast Tread's horse, then I'm pretty much losing quite a lot of effectiveness. So I think that I would want to start afresh, I think, if I'm honest. I think that we know a lot more about the game. We know a lot more about what we want to get from the game. And therefore it would be cool to start it. I'm absolutely up for playing Lobelia, Sackville Baggins.
Yeah. Is everyone fighting to play Lobelia?
I will cosplay it on camera if needs be.
Which old woman voice will you use?
Probably number 3. In fact, I'd cultivate a special woman voice.
One point that I picked up on in the Q&A is that the game has been scaled down slightly to accommodate fewer players in the group. So the original concept with the first edition was large groups, large fellowships. So I think that'll work quite well for us.
That will do so.
Yeah,
definitely. Okay, so now let's move on to some of the more esoteric factors. So we've waxed lyrical about the artwork. With everything that I see is people unsolicited saying what great product quality Free League produces, great design, fantastic components. We've spoken a bit about moving the scope across Eriador. The time shift has moved forward. So it's no longer defaults to 5 years after the Battle of the Five Armies. No longer in that honeymoon period. It's not the spring of time. It's getting more close to the autumn, moving to the winter, really. So you can see why there is a darker tone to the artwork. Why there would be kind of more martial aspects or what have you to that. And I think the art direction helps support that. Is there anything else that we kind of want to pull through in terms of the second edition, what we think it's going to do at the table, and also maybe just what would we like it to do as it moves forward? So I think, Joe, you've spoken about in our pre-chat about the Adventures Companion that Francesco touched on, so maybe we start there and work ourselves out.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because Francesco said it was on the roadmap as a very early product, so it comes ahead of kind of those region books and supplements or adventure books that in first edition had kind of bolt-on rules or new cultures and things like that. So he said that it's set out as a fairly early product and that it will have it will expand the list of cultures that you can choose from. So that's very interesting that that's mapped out as an early product to support the core book. And I think that's what anyone who's played first edition will want to hear really is, well, where's my culture? How do I either convert my my Rohirrim minstrel, or how do I build this Beorning beekeeper that I've got in my mind because of a certain living card game that I've played. It's just worth talking a little bit about the paraphernalia and the kind of tactile stuff that there is in this game, because I mean the dice in first edition are great, and it's a very different system of dice to most other games. And it just seems like there are even more dice in this game. So you get 2 feet dice probably very early on in your adventuring career, as well as your 6 success dice. And the Loremaster has Sauronic dice as well. Yeah. So yeah, I mean throwing dice is great. It's I don't think it's a secret that Francesco likes dice in his games. War of the Ring second edition is a real dice throwing fest, and it's done very well. The dice are just superb in that game.
Fantastic. Matt,
don't think that Sauronic dice are only going to be used by that lawkeeper.
No, that's 100% going to be the case. Every Sauronic dice.
That's how I'm going to roll with disadvantage.
Every Sauronic dice that gets rolled counts towards your your opponents. So
they corrupt. They will corrupt you.
They will. They will find their own way back to their master. That's what I'm saying.
Mm. And then there's obviously the cards as well. Stance cards, which I think we unlocked in the stretch goals. You'd flip them over and they have journey rolls on them. The items, as Matt said.
I think to bring ourselves back a little to the purpose of this video, it's about what difference do we expect this edition to make at the table from our lived experience of playing the game, and artwork that inspires, artwork that makes you feel a sense of place and a sense of purpose, and then the accessories that make you feel engaged in the play. Because one of the things that we haven't called out explicitly is just the more interactive nature of some of the rules decisions. It is more interactive to roll 2 dice It is more interactive to roll a hope dice than it is to just say, "Oh, I'll spend a point of hope." So that brings you into the game and immerses you more into it, and therefore it's a more fulfilling experience. So there's another Q&A with Francesco. I would really encourage everybody just to watch the Q&As with Francesco and Martin. There's a lot of information in them, but you also get a sense of the fastidiousness and the sense of responsibility that the design team are taking for the property that they have in the game that they're going to produce, so that we can all enjoy it. It's quite inspiring in its own way. So we are, I think, looking forward to second edition.
I think.
Hell yeah!
I think it's it's. Well,
Yes.
I've ordered it. Put it that way.
I genuinely can't really stop thinking about it. I'm kind of checking updates every day and going back to first edition stuff and rereading it, because I'm just, I'm riding the crest of that wave.
Yeah,
fantastic.
I've ordered my edition.
Excellent work.
So I've one step on from where we were last time.
Good stuff. So thank you very much for watching. I hope that was both useful and entertaining, but more informative, I think, than anything else. We will be back if there are substantive updates. Other than that, just drop us a question in the comments, and we'll answer them. Tend to respond to comments as much as we can do so. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.